original sound on. We got Howard here. Shabbos. Shavuos. And just say all the good things are coming. And Cantor, why don't we get started? However you want to get started.
Great. So we're going to start on page 235 for Mo Dev Avodah Ani.
Page 192. Turn now to page 194. Cool thing. Betsy, I don't know how you typed your name into Hebrew, but that's awesome. So Betsy on Zoom right now is written out as Betsy Tepper in Hebrew, which is great. Very good. You'll tell us afterwards, Betsy. That's great. Okay, page 196. 48, and we'll rise for our series of daily miracles. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan l'safri bina l'achid ben yom u'ben layla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zodek elufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, rocha haaretz ha'mayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamechin mitzadek gaber. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish harumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hanoten le'ahev koach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamarir shinam einai, u'tnumai afapai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani b'tzelem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ozer Yisrael b'gvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ozer Yisrael b'tifara. Okay, please be seated. We're now on page 205. We'll read the second reading down from the very top. From the cowardice that shrinks from new truth, from the laziness that is content with half-truths, from the arrogance that thinks it knows all truth, O God of truth, deliver us. Blessed is Adonai, teacher of Torah to your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, hamelamed Torah le'amo Yisrael. Turn now to page 206. Elu devarim she'ein lahem shiur, she'adam ochel parotehem ba'olam hazeh, ve'akeren kayemet lo le'olam haba, le'elu hein. Kibud avaim ugmilut chasadim, ve'hashkamat beit hamidrash shacharit ve'arabit, ve'achnasat orchim u'bikur koholim, ve'achnasat kala levayat hamet v'yun tefila, ve'avat shalom ben adam la'chaveiro, ve'talmud Torah keneged kulam. We'll rise for the opening blessing of Pesukim Zimmer on page 212. Baruch shehamar v'hayah haolam, Baruch Baruch oseh bereshit, Baruch omer v'yoseh, Baruch ozer u'mekayem, Baruch merachem al haaretz, Baruch merachem al habrihot, Baruch meshalem sachar tov v'rehav, Baruch chaylat v'kayam hanetzach, Baruch bodeh u'matziel, Baruch shemo. B'shpachot u'b'zmirot negadelcha, u'nshabechecha nefercha v'nazkir shimcha v'namlichecha, Malkeinu Eloheinu, Yachid chei olamim, Melech meshubach mufoar deyad shemo hagadol, Baruch atah Adonai, Melech mehulal b'tishpachot. Please be seated. We're on page 214. Tov le'odol Adonai, Tov le'odol Adonai, ulezamer le'shimcha elyon, Tov le'odol Adonai, le'hagid b'boker chasdecha, le'hagid b'boker chasdecha, ve'emunatcha b'leilot, ve'emunatcha b'leilot, tov le'odot Adonai. Alehi asur belinabel, alehi gayon bechinor, ki simachani Adonai befoalecha, v'maaseh yadecha ranein. Magadu maasecha ya, me'od Magadu Masechaya Me'odam Kumachshevotecha Magadu Masechaya Me'odam Kumachshevotecha. Now on page 215.
Page 218.
Hallelujah.
et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. Continue silently on page 219. We're on page 220 at the very top. Ilu finu maleh shirakayam Ushonenu rina kamon galam Vesivtotenu shevav kemarchevei rakiyam Vehinenu meirot kashemesh Vechayareach Veyadenu frusot kenishrei shamayim Veragneinu kalot kayalot Ein anachnu maspikim lehodot lecha Adonai Eloheinu Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu. Continue silently. We're now on page 222, the second paragraph down in Hebrew. Shochen ad ma'arom v'kadosh shemo v'chatur hanenu tzadikim Adonai la'yesharim na'avat tehilah v'fi yesharim halalu divrei tzadikim titbarach u'vilshon chasidim titromamu v'kerev kedoshim titkadashu ma'kehalot rivevotam chabei Yisrael v'rinai par shimcha malkeinu b'chol dor v'ador yabavai yabavai bye 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 yabavai yabavai bye bye yabavai bye yabavai yabavai bye 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 Arise for the concluding blessing of page 223 of Psuke de Zimra, and then continue standing on to page 224 and 226 for the Chatzi Kaddish and Baruch. Yishtabach shimcha la'ad malkeinu ha'el ha'melech ha'gadol v'ha'kadosh v'shamayim u'ba'aretz ki lecha na'e Adonai Eloheinu Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu shir mishpacha v'zimra v'zumemshala netzach gedula u'pura tila v'tiferet kedusha u'malchut brachot ve'hodot me'ata ve'ad olam baruch ata Adonai el melech gadol v'tishbachot el hodot Adon niflaot abocher b'shirei zimra melech el chei ha'olamim yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbai yamad yirach yirteh v'yamlich malchuteh v'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael v'hagala u'bizman karim v'imeru amen yesh shemei rabbai mevarach le'alam le'almei almayah yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitramah v'yitnaseh Nitadar v'yitale v'yitala al shemei dekucha Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran v'alma v'imeru Amen. Barechu et Adonai hamevorach Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Vaed. Please be seated. We're now on page page 228.
Continue silently until the end of the page.
We're now on page 230. Please join us on page 234. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל ידיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבביך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ולכתך בדרך ושוכבך ופקומך ושרתם לראות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. On page 236. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם ונתנו על ציצית הכנף בטיל תכלת והיה לכם לציצית וריתם אותו זכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים אלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם. We're now at the top of page 239. Emet, there is no place where you are not. Even in the wilderness, there is your word. Emet, the pen strokes of lightning, white fire, black flame, stir the soul's passion, guide our sacred way. True and enduring is Torah. Your truth for us is certain and established, now and forevermore. Like Moses, Miriam, and all Israel, we sing out and rejoice. On page 240. The Amidah begins on page 242. I'll invite you to rise in body or spirit. We'll begin together on page 242 and then continue silently. As always, please go at your own pace, and when you're finished, you may be seated.
Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi aditei batecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise.
Okay, for those still davening your Amidah, please continue. For those that are finished, you can join us on page 324 for the repetition. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor VeHaNorah El Elyon V'Melech Chasadim Tovim V'Koneh HaKol Lezocher Chasdei Avot V'Imahot U'mevei Geulah Livnei Bneihem Leman Shemo B'Ahavah Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham V'Ezrat Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayim Itim Atarav L'Oshia Morid Hadam Mechakeh Chaim B'Chesed Mechayim Itim B'Rachamim Rabim Somech Noflim B'Rafeh Cholim U'Matir Asurim U'Mechayim Emunato L'Shenei Afar Nichamocha B'Gevurot U'Midra Melech Melech Memit U'Mechayeh U'Matzmiach Yeshua Manata L'Chayot Meitim Baruch atah Adonai Mechayeh HaMeitim. Kedusha is on page 326. now on page 329, the very top of the page.
ישמחו
במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת בקוראי עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת בקוראי עונג שבת. מקדשי שירי שבת, כולם ישמעו ויצנגו מיתו לך שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת בקוראי עונג שבת. והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו שבת. חמדת ימים אותו קראת שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת בקוראי עונג שבת. זכר למעשה בראשית שבת. זכר למעשה בראשית שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת בקוראי עונג שבת.
Page 330, and we'll read together in English in the middle of the page. On this Shabbat day, as you graciously receive our prayers, help us to hear your call. Grant us enough health to fulfill our duties and the compassion we need to attend to others. Teach us humility that we may perceive our own faults, and grant us the wisdom to be forgiving of others. Give us the courage to be true to our highest selves and the charity to see the best in those around us. Give us patience enough not to become discouraged, hope enough to overcome all fears for the future, and faith enough to know your presence. O source of blessing, look with favor upon us. May our offerings be acceptable to you. Baruch atah Adonai shelcha levatcha b'ranavod. We'll turn now to page 332 and begin reading together in English at the bottom of the page. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations, modim anachnu lach. For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons, modim anachnu lach. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements, modim anachnu lach. For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression, modim anachnu lach. For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared, modim anachnu lach. For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom, modim anachnu lach. For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose, modim anachnu lach. We pray that we may live not by our fears but by our hopes, not by our words but by our deeds. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulechana lehodot. Page 334, Sim Shalom at the very top of the page.
Sim Shalom,
Tova ubracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, amecha, Marcheinu Yotzreinu kulanu kechad, ve'or panecha, hireh panecha natata lanu, Adonai Eloheinu. Sim Shalom, Tova ubracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, amecha, Torah chaim ve'avat chesed, u'tzedakah u'bracha v'rachamim lechaim v'shalom. Sim Shalom, Tova u'bracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael amecha, ve'tov beinecha levarech et amcha Yisrael b'chol עת ובכל שעה לשלומך. Sim Shalom, Tova u'bracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael amecha. Baruch atah Adonai, hamevarech et amo Yisrael v'shalom.
Let's read together on page 337 at the very top. Prayer is not purely an act. All things pray and all things pour forth their souls. The heavens pray, the earth prays, every creature and every living thing. In all life there is longing. Creation is itself but a longing, a kind of prayer to the Almighty. What are the clouds, the rising and the setting of the sun, the soft radiance of the moon and the gentleness of the night? What are the flashes of the human mind and the storms of the human heart? They are all prayers, the wordless outpouring of boundless longing for God. Oseh shalom bimrama, u'yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Okay, Shabbat Shalom everybody. Shabbat Shalom Bensy, Shabbat Shalom Howard. I'm just going to turn the brightness down on this end to conserve some power. Okay, so Parshat Bamidbar, as I mentioned last night at greater length, anniversary of my bar mitzvah. My dad tells me it is, what did he say it was? 28. That's horrifying. It's a horrifying number to think of. 28 years ago.
No.
28 years ago, Parshat Bamidbar.
That's long.
Yeah, I still have my dad found my original drash, and I have it upstairs in my pile of important documents, and I emphasize the word pile, because it is certainly not well organized. But it's nice because I get a reminder text from my father in case I were to ever forget in my line of work, which seems very much impossible, but he always writes to remind me, and he sent me some pictures, which was very cute. So this morning I'm not going to give my bar mitzvah drash, but I am going to talk about part of the parsha actually that I didn't really talk about then, and I tend not to talk about much at all, but actually is really quite fascinating, which is about the Levites, and in particular of their role and their function and some of the sort of limitations that are placed upon them. In a bit, we're going to read what would be the fourth Aliyah for the morning, which begins with chapter 3. If you want to turn, it's on page 905 in the Plowed Chumash, and just on the bottom of page 800 in the Women's Torah Commentary. But in this section, basically, we read, which is not entirely surprising, that there are, again, sort of expectations of the Levites. First of all, who are they, right? The name says it all. They're from the tribe of Levi. And the tribe of Levi, to begin with, is taken as basically a stand-in for what should have been Peter Rechem, the first issues, basically, all of the things that are born, the firstlings, as they're usually called, right? Which means human beings, Jews specifically, animals, tithings, all these things, right? The first of stuff. So originally the idea was that the first of all of the tribes of Israel were supposed to serve in this role that associates, the priesthood and the functioning of the temple and all that stuff. But because of the sin of the golden calf, the Levites basically are taken in place of. And within the tribe of Levi is a subset of that tribe, which we refer to as the Kohanim, the priesthood, which is directly tied to Aaron and his sons. So the Levites and the Kohanim together represent basically, they're really in essence one tribe. But as soon as this sort of creation of roles happens, right, the Kohanim, at least in our mind, become the preeminent. And the Levites get sort of this kind of, a lack of true appreciation for just how important they are and were and continue to be in a lot of ways in the modern manifestations of the role. And I'm sort of winking at my friend Howard here, sitting so quietly in the back row, because even though I don't think you are a Levi, right, a lot of what you do as a shamash for the shul, and is the case throughout shuls all over, and my guess is that Schwatzkis have fulfilled this role in multiple shuls over the years, is really to function in this kind of way, right, is to do a lot of the stuff that needs to be done. I'm making him blush, right? Things that need to be done in order for, right, whoever is in the position of leading the service or whatever ritual is going on to be able to do that. And, as a small town rabbi, right, in a smaller congregation where we do a lot of different kinds of things, it becomes all the more important actually to have, right, lay leadership, people from both within and without, who make all this stuff function and work. Okay, but in the Torah, it's not quite as simple as all that, and it's not quite as ideal, because again, the role of the Levites, especially at the point of the Mishkan, is a lot of heavy labor. So their roles, as defined in this parsha and other places in the Torah, are generally speaking, let's just say the more glamorous part of the job would be the singing and the playing of instruments, right? Big important part of the experience, certainly. Our modern manifestation of that being the incredible cantors that we've had over the years, that their main sort of focus was on making sure that whatever celebratory psalms or prayers or anything that's going on in that kind of way, that you have people who are gifted in singing and playing instruments. But then there are also necessary guards, people who are going to be stationed at various places throughout the night, right? Unending amounts of protection of the Mishkan and eventually of the temple itself. And then the last is what we would, I guess, euphemistically refer to as the schleps, right? The people who carry this to that, and they pack up this thing and that. And, I had something of an experience. It wasn't even occurring to me until I sat down to think about it for this morning. But, last night we had this service outdoors, which, Lauren knows, it involves quite a lot of schlepping, right? Of moving things back and forth, of hundreds of feet of cable and heavy this and that and the other. And, you start to have a greater appreciation for the fact that things don't just happen like this, right? And so that's a big part of what our parsha is about, is sort of delineating, who the Levites are, what their responsibilities are. But then we get a section of chapter 3 where we talk about something which, again, is still kind of fresh in our minds, which is that this is not just like any kind of schlepping job, right? This is not picking up this and moving it to that. This is the Mishkan, right? This is the thing that we're told is supposed to be the resting place of God's presence in the world, and eventually the temple even more so, right? This is not your average everyday stuff. In the same way that I wouldn't schlep the Torah, so to speak, I would schlep a table, I'd schlep a chair, but you carry the Torah with a certain reverence and awareness of its significance. But nonetheless, right, the table is no less important than the Torah in some ways, because without the table, there's nothing for the Torah to rest upon. Okay, but the concept is that when you're moving the Torah, you're going to be in a different kind of mindset. And we're warned, according to this parsha, and we again know this to some degree from the story of Nadav and Abihu, that if one acts improperly, right, goes a place that they're not supposed to go, does something they're not supposed to do, what generally happens to them? Looking around. Kaboom, right? One form or the other, it doesn't, fancy too, right? Not well, okay, not well. So there is a heightened sense of the act, and there's a heightened sense of of just what's at stake. And as it's expressed in this portion, there's also that feeling of, well, why? Right? Like, what is it about all this stuff that we should be so concerned that if anybody, we're told, anybody, including the wrong set of Levites, right? Each of the Levites are sort of, as I said, subdivided into different groups and responsibilities. If one of them should do something they're not supposed to, go where they're not supposed to, right? The end, it says here very clearly, is death. There's no in between. So I want to share a little bit of a teaching from Rabbi Aviva Rickman, who is I think she is the Rosh Yeshiva at Hadar, and she's an incredible teacher of Torah. So a lot of her stuff is free and available on Hadar's website. She has podcasts, all sorts of great things to learn from. But she had a really interesting take on this that I wanted to share with you. And she called this teaching Dismantling Holiness with Love. Okay, Dismantling Holiness with Love. So she explains, as Israel traveled through the desert, they frequently erected the Mishkan, the tabernacle, anew. This means that they also deconstructed the Mishkan frequently, dismantling what had been sacred. The act of taking down the Mishkan was an especially fragile moment. When we are so aware of the logistics involved in creating spaces to facilitate a sublime experience, it can become demystifying, for better or for worse. In Parshat Bamidbar, she says, we get a behind-the-scenes view of the logistics of holiness and a profound message about how to balance the mystique of Kedusha alongside the very mundane and relentless work to sustain. Okay? At the end of the Parsha, the first group of the tribe of Levi receives their task. The clan of Kehat is one of the sort of 4 subdivisions of the tribe of Levi, all deriving ultimately from Kehat, who was, I'm trying to remember the son of, it was one of the sons of Levi. Makes sense. And ultimately speaking, all of the sort of, derivations from that point on, all are considered as part of this kind of sub-tribe within the tribe itself. Okay? So, the clan of Kehat ultimately carries the most sacred items of the Mishkan, the Kodesh Kodashim, including the Ark. It is no simple matter, therefore, to transport these vessels that command such gravity and honor while set up. In particular, the Ark requires a careful procedure where first Aaron and the Kohanim cover it with the parochet, the curtain that separates the Holy of Holies. Right, back in our temple, we would have that big covering over here. It's called the parochet. Right, they would cover the Ark with the parochet itself, the curtain that separates the Holy of Holies from the rest of the Mishkan, and then with other cloths on top of it. And only after all that's been done by the Kohanim, then the clan of Kehat can come and pick it up. So in other words, they're not involved in the pack. It's probably like, Howard, you've probably moved more than any other person that I know from house to house out here. Right? When you have, movers come in, you let them pack up 95% of it, right? But the 5% of it that is sacred to you, right, you pack yourself, right? That, whatever it might be, that kind of mentality. So in this case, right, the Kohanim have to do that first step before the tribe of Kehat, can even come close to it. Yet, okay, right, and undermines, ultimately speaking, hold on a second, got separated here. No, cut it off. All right, well, I'm going to do my very best to paraphrase what she's talking about here then. And I'll point you towards the full article so you can read it in its entirety. But what she basically says is that, right, this idea of taking things down and packing up is also fraught with some of this experience as well. And that in the end, this idea that they could just kind of come in, pack it all up, and leave is a concern. And so part of the argument here, right, is that one of the reasons why all this prohibition about not touching this, not coming there, could simply be as simple as God says, don't do this, don't do it. Right? That's what happens with the Nadav and Abihu. We don't get an explanation. It's just God says, don't do this stuff, and basically they did something they weren't supposed to, and that's it. But there's another suggestion that Rabbi Rickman is ultimately going to posit in her writing, which is that maybe actually the concern is what will happen on a spiritual level to people like the Kehatites, who are responsible for packing up the Ark, when suddenly this big, holy, sacred thing is no longer sacred and holy. Right? As soon as they start to dismantle it, God's presence leaves, and suddenly that which a few minutes ago felt like the most important object in the world is suddenly now a box, or a piece of cloth, right, or a rope, or some other kind of thing. And the danger in this kind of scenario is the idea that it may, as she says, sort of demystify things. right? To take something that was otherwise this big, beautiful, holy kind of concept, and then ultimately speaking, to turn it into something that becomes sort of mundane, right? I have some portions of what she said, right? Even those acts of dismantling, though, contain a certain kind of power. Jewish life and community over the past many centuries reflects a constant state of attempting to carve out space for holiness across time and location, dismantling previous attempts and trying again. There is always potential for this kind of instability to undermine a sense of power of holiness, but it can also lead to a much more healthy and robust religious life. It becomes entirely out of the question to slip into familiarity and a fetishized version of holiness, overly fixated on a particular form of expression. Yes, we rebuild the Mishkan using the same materials and structure, but by virtue of each moment of our life experiences and knowledge of the wider world around us, it would be an error to assume that the way to reach God from where we stand today is the same as it was yesterday. There are periods of distance and jittery nervousness when we feel we have landed on a new possibility for connecting. Dismantling and rebuilding holiness so frequently is hard. As our Parsha emphasizes, it can have drastic consequences. But it is of absolute necessity. Until we have the confidence to say God dwells securely in our world, while we remain in a much less certain reality, all we can do is trust that God is waiting to embrace us at every turn, like the Keruvim, like the angels that are set above the ark, and set our compass with this vision of a deep mutual love of our North Star. So what is she basically saying? There is this concern about what happens to us when we break down and we build back up again. We break down and build back up again. It feels like it would be better to just keep everything exactly as it is, and that everything that is sacred remains sacred, and there is no change to that whatsoever. What she's saying is that in this Parsha we need to be aware of, and we need to be respectful of the idea that from time to time we do need to sort of disassemble the holy space and re-establish it, but that's part of our process, and that we have to treat the building up and the breaking down with an equal air of reverence and appreciation. And so this idea, I think, as it ties to the Levites and as it ties to our Parsha as a whole, and as it ties especially to our beginning, our really end of our process of preparing for the holiday of Shavuot and the receiving of the Torah, is this feeling that sometimes in our relationship with the holy or the sacred, which we'll have a chance to talk about much more with Dr. Joseph, or Rabbi Dr. Joseph, in just a bit, right? But this idea of holiness means that at some points it's going to feel fully constructed. It's going to feel like the Mishkan. It's going to feel like everything's in its place. Everything is going to be exactly as we envision it and want it to be. And then there are other times where it's going to feel like, it's packed up into its component parts. It's lost its sort of sacred luster. And that by being cognizant of both of these spaces and aware of both of these spaces and respectful of both of these spaces, that we need not fear it. We just simply need to go into it with a different kind of mindset. And I think ultimately speaking, for me, as I said, part of the challenge sometimes of moments like last night, right, where I was saying to Lauren, 15 different wires connecting to 15 other things, 30 other things that could go wrong, right? Any number of sort of quotidian logistical problems that are going through a rabbi or a cantor's mind as they're leading a service. It's really very easy to pull out of that sense of sort of sacred feeling and obligation, right? That moment that's supposed to feel sort of heightened and beautiful, instead you're filled up with all of this other stuff. But I think that's part of the experience as well, is that really what is it about? It's about caring about details so that the experience of everybody who is experiencing and participating in the service feels like they are in fact in a sacred and holy experience. And if you're not prepared, and if you don't take that stuff seriously, and if you're not respectful of both the putting up and the taking down, then what you get actually is a mess. You get people, basically complaining, or people distracted by something that should be working that isn't. And I've been a part of those kinds of experiences before. I've been responsible for those experiences before. And every single time, yes, there are some things that are out of our control, but more often than not, I would say in my experience, it's from a lack of preparation. It's from a lack of taking seriously these different kinds of actions, right? The stuff that we do, even when it seems simple and even when it seems just schlepping or moving around, can be a sacred act. And sacred acts can be, as I said, taken away just as easily if we don't come into them with a gratitude and appreciation for what they are. So, I'm sorry that I lost track of the full teaching here, but just a reminder for those that would want to check it out. Rabbi Aviva Rickman, and the name of her drasha is Dismantling Holiness with Love. And it's worth reading the entirety of it because it really is quite beautiful. And we'll get a chance, as I said, to have some really great Torah in just a little bit from Rabbi Dr. Joseph. And I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. And as I said, we're going to read in just a minute from the beginning of chapter 3, which is on page 905 in the Plaid Chumash, and the very bottom of page 800 in the Women's Torah Comment. Before we get to any of that reading, though, we'll turn back in our Sidurim to page 362 for Seder Kriyat HaTorah. Ein kamocha Elohim Adonai ve'ein kemasecha malchutcha malchut kol olamim u'mershaltecha bechol dor v'dor Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed Adonai oz le'amo yitein Adonai yevarech et amo b'shalom Abba harachamim heitiv ha'bertzoncha et Zion pivnei cholot Yerushalayim ki bechad levad batachnu melech el ram v'nisa Adon olamim ki mitzion tetzei Torah ki mitzion tetzei Torah udevar Adonai miYerushalayim Baruch shenatan Torah Torah Baruch shenatan Torah Torah le'amo Yisrael b'kdushato Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo
Gadol Adonai Ti'une Olamah Shemo Yachdav Lecha Adonai HaGedula HaGevura VeHaTiferet VeHaNetzach VeHaHod Ki Chol B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz Ki Chol B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz Adonai HaMamlacha Ve'amid Na'aseh Lechol Erosh Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Le'har Kodsho. Okay, please be seated. Howard, I think you're up for an aliyah, because,
How come?
unless Betsy, you want it, you're welcome to have it from virtual. No, he's waving you off. All right, so Howard, here's I don't think you need it, but we'll do it in any case. Yamot v'yesh ben Chananya L'aliyah Rishona or L'aliyah. Okay, go ahead. Baruch Hanam Barach Le'olam Ba'ed. Amen. Amen. Mele Todot Aharon uMoshe Beyom Diber Adonai et Moshe Behar Sinai Ve'ele Shemot Bnei Aharon HaBechor Nadav Ve'avihu Elazar Ve'itamar Ele Shemot Bnei Aharon HaKohanim HaMeshuchim Asher Milei Yadam Lechahen Vayamot Nadav ve'Abihu lifnei Adonai behikravam Esh Sahara lifnei Adonai b'midbar Sinai uvanav uvanim lo hayu lahem vayechahen Elazar ve'itamar al penei Aharon avihem vayedaber Adonai el Moshe lemor Hakerev et matei Levi Veha'amadeta oto lifnei Aharon hakohen Veshertu oto Veshameru et mishmarto Ve'et mishmeret kol ha'eda Lifnei ohel moed La'avod et avodat hamishkan Veshamru et kol klei ohel moed Ve'et mishmeret b'nei Yisrael La'avod et avodat hamishkan Ve'natata et haleviim La'aharon ulvanav Netunim hema lo me'et b'nei Yisrael ve'et Aharon ve'et banav tifkod ve'shamaru et kehunatam ve'hazar hakarev yumat ve'daber Adonai el Moshe lemor v'ani הנה לקחתי את הלוויים מתוך בני ישראל תחת כל בכור פטר רחם מבני ישראל והיו לי הלוויים כי לי כל בכור ביום הכותי כל בכור בארץ מצרים הקדשתי לי כל בכור בישראל מאדם עד בהמה לי אני אדוני. Amen. Yasher Koach, Howard. It's your annual aliyah. That's the only one. It's the only one you'll take. It's maybe semi. We can work up to semi-annual. That would be good. Thank you. As we have our Torah still in our midst, we'll offer our Mishaberach, our prayer for healing this morning. And we're on page 371 back in our prayer books. Mishaberach Avotenu v'Imotenu Abraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah Hu Yivarech et HaCholim Ha'elu. And in addition to the names I'll read in a moment, which are in our community and connected to our community, we of course continue to pray for the people of Ukraine and for the various communities over the last several weeks who have experienced gun violence as well. In our community this morning, we're thinking of Sydney Ross, Roberta Kyle, Rivka Bat Yehuda Vabela, Eve Rose, Michoel Ben Chananya, David Kyle Klotman, Betsy Tepper, Samuel Moskowitz, Devorah Bat Sima, Michael Klinghofer, Norma Paulsack, Amy Cass, Steve Levine, Rivka Bat Rachel, Gail Gambino, Leo Bat Naomi, Gedalia Ben Sylvia, Lorraine Danis, David Dowling, Sylvia Devorah Bat Francis, Myra Peskowitz, Chaim Live, Deborah Block-Kroll, Sylvia Orn, Michelle Sawicki, Francis Kirschman, Paul Eric Feuden Bat Esther, Shelley Newmark, Diane Axelrod, Gabriella Rose Spicer, Dina Batchana, Marjorie Rubin, Andrew Paris, Phyllis Fisher, Moshe Eliezer Ben Yakutiel, Judy Yang, Maxine Eisenstadt, Lorraine Davis, Jeffrey Miller, Brad Friedman, and Paul Greenfield. In addition to the names that we just read, we'll invite those that are on the Zoom or watching at home to add additional names if you choose. Anyone in the room to add to the list? Howard, you got anybody? HaKadosh Baruch Hu yimalei rachamim alehem lahachalimam l'rabotam l'chazikam v'yishlach lehem mehera refuah Refuah shlema min hashamayim, refuat hanefesh, refuat haguf. Hashta b'agalav zman kariv v'nomar amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal those who are suffering. May the Blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit, and let us say together, Amen. El na refana la, el na refana la, el na refana la, refuah shelema. El na refana lo, el na refana lo, el na refana lo, refuah shelema. And we'll rise as we lift and dress the Torah on the bottom of page 370. 370. Vezot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai v'yad Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Okay, please be seated. This morning's Haftarah comes from the prophet Hosea. It's on page 917 in the Plat Chumash, 917. And if you don't have a Plat Chumash at home, again, you're looking for the prophet Hosea, chapter 2, verses 1 to 22. Again, Hosea chapter 2, verses 1 to 22, page 917 in the Plat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nbiim tovim v'ratza b'divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai abocher b'torah u'Moshe abdo u'Yisrael amo u'b'nbiei ha'emet b'tzedek. The number of the people of Israel shall be like the sands of the sea, not to be measured or counted. And where they are called, you are not my people, they shall be called the children of the living God. The people of Judah and Israel shall be gathered together and choose for themselves a single head and rise up from the ground. For the day of Jezreel will be great. Call your brothers my people and your sisters loved by God. Complain against your mother, complain, for she is no longer my wife, and I am not her husband. Let her remove her whorings from her face, her adulteries from between her breasts, or I will strip her naked and expose her as on the day she was born, and make her like the wilderness, turn her into a dry land, and kill her with thirst. And I will show her children no love, for they are children of whoring. Their mother played the whore, she bore them and acted shamefully, saying, I will go after my lovers, who give me my bread and my water, my wool and my linen, my oil and my drink. So I am blocking her path with thorns, walling her in. She shall not find her way. However hard she pursues her lover, she shall not catch them. She will look for them, but shall not find them. And then she will say, let me go back to my first husband. I was better off then than now. She did not consider that I was the one who gave her the grain, the wine, and the oil. I gave her abundant silver and gold, which they used for Baal. Therefore I am taking back my grain in its time, my wine in its season. I take away my wool and linen that she uses to cover her nakedness. I will uncover her shame in the sight of her lovers, and none will save her from my hand. I will make an end to her rejoicing, her pilgrim feasts, her new moons and Sabbaths, all her festivals. And I will destroy her vines and her fig trees, of which she said, they are my hire, given me by my lovers. I will turn them into a forest, and wild animals shall consume them. So I will punish her for all the feast days when she offered incense to the various Baals, and putting on her rings and her jewels, she ran after her lovers, forgetting me, says the Eternal One. That is when I will entice her to me, lead her to the wilderness, and speak to her heart. From there I will give her back her vineyards, and make the valley of trouble the door of hope. And there she shall respond as when she was young, when she came out of Egypt. And on that day, says the Eternal One, you will call me my man, and no longer call me my Baal. For I will erase the names of the Baals from her mouth, and they shall no longer be mentioned by name. On that day I will make a covenant for them with beasts of the field, birds of the air, and with creeping things on the ground. I will remove the bow, the sword, and war from the land, and make them lie down in safety. I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you to me in righteousness and justice, in steadfast love and compassion. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know the Eternal. So, what's funny is, after all these years, I don't remember my Haftarah, and so I wrote to my dad, and I said, can you make a recording of it? I'll see if I can learn it by tomorrow. And so he made the recording, but then he said to me, he's like, this doesn't seem familiar to me. So I'm wondering whether we did an alternate, given the nature of the content of it.
Yeah,
Right, it was Machar Chodesh stuff, right, which is...
You choose an alternate for...
that's a heavy...
the mitzvah.
Yeah.
It's like...
Yeah, this one would not probably make it into the list of choices.
This is
But
for a bar mitzvah.
right, yeah, it's a bit tricky for sure. But there is one part of it that is particularly relevant, which is the last two lines.
Yes.
For those that have never laid tefillin before, it won't stand out. But anybody who's ever taught how to lay tefillin, this is what you are saying as you're wrapping 3 times around your finger at the bottom of the process. You're basically, it's also not uncommon these days to use it as an alternate vow in a wedding, and that basically this is sort of the image of Veras Tichli, of sort of, betrothing me to you forever, right? These are the sort of things that are done. So it's, in essence, every time that you're laying tefillin, you're basically betrothing yourself to God in a sort of symbolic ritual kind of way. Veras Tich is not the easiest Hebrew word, though.
That's sort of summarized. It's
Right.
a nice ending to that.
Yes, well, it tries to bring it back into a positive light. And of course, just to be very clear here, this is, it's one of the various imageries that, anybody who's in our prophets class will know, that it is very common in the prophets especially to use this sort of analogy of, or the metaphor of a husband and a wife, and a faithless husband or faithless wife, most often faithless wife. So all of this stuff is euphemism.
Faithless wife.
Yeah, well, so that's what this is, right. This is what it's sort of basically saying, is that it's God upset with the fact that both the northern tribes of Israel and the southern tribes of Judah are making alliances basically with other powers, right? So when it's talking about going after, the person gives you oil and the person who gives you wheat and the other stuff, it has to do with basically putting their faith in outside powers to protect them and to sustain them and to give them things, whereas instead it should be based in a relationship with God. So this sort of choice of, and obviously the language itself is hard for us as moderns to even begin to fathom, especially as Lauren points out, if you were B'nai Mitzvah, it probably is tricky that way.
Studied this
Yeah, but I'm curious to think actually that if there was an alternate, what the choice was. We'd have to look and see what. Yeah, no. So Lauren, maybe we'll figure that out, and I'll see if either me or my father remember it any better than this. But in any case, I haven't done the concluding blessing yet, though, right?
No.
Good. Page 372. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol haolamim, tzaddik b'chol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer ve'oseh, ha'medaber u'mekayem, shekol dvarav emet v'tzedek, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושה ולמנוחה לכבוד ולתפארת על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת Okay, so we'll turn now to page 376 to offer a prayer for our country at the bottom of the page, and then a prayer for the state of Israel on page 377. O guardian of life and liberty, may our nation always merit your protection. Teach us to give thanks for what we have by sharing it with those who are in need. Keep our eyes open to the wonders of creation and alert to the care of the earth. May we never be lazy in the work of peace. May we honor those who have died in defense of our ideals. Grant our leaders wisdom and forbearance. May they govern with justice and compassion. Help us all to appreciate one another and to respect the many ways that we may serve you. May our homes be safe from affliction and strife, and our country be sound in body and spirit. Amen. We're now on page 377. Avinu Shebashamayim Tzur Yisrael v'Goalo Barech et Medinat Yisrael Reishit Tzmichat Gulatinu Hagen Aleha Be'evrat Chastecha Ufros Aleha Sukat Shlomecha Ushlach Orcha V'Amidcha L'Rasheha Sareha V'Yoatzeha V'Taknem Be'etzah Tova Milfanecha V'Natata Shalom Ba'aretz V'Simchat Olam Le'yoshbeha V'Nomar Amen.
Amen.
O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love, spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. And together we say, Amen. We turn to page 374 as we conclude the Torah service and we rise in body or spirit. Yeah, hallelujah, Shem Adonai, Ki Nizkav Shemo Levado, Odo al Eretz V'Shamayim, Vayaharem Keren Le'amo, Tehila Lechol Chasidav, Libnei Yisrael Am Kirovo, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Ki Lekachto Natati Lachem Torati Al Tazohu, Etzvahim Lama Chaziti Bo, Letom Cheha Meushar Deracheha, Darchei Noam, Bechol Netivoteha, Shalom Hashivenu Adonai, Elecha ben Hashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh Yameinu, Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. Turn now to page 586 at the bottom of the page, Aleinu L'Shabeach. Aleinu L'Shabeach Ladon HaKol, Latech Gedula Leotzer Breshit, Shelo Asanu Kigoyei Ha'aratzot, Velo Samanu K'mishpechot Ha'adama, Shelo Sam Chelkeinu Kahem, Vegor Aleinu Kekol Hamonam, Vanachnu Korim U'mishtachavim U'modim, Lifnei Melech Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Page 591. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz, bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. Now ask those in mourning, those observing yard site to please remain standing. Everyone else may be seated at this time. We begin by thinking of those who passed in our community in recent months. Dr. John Abderkin, Martin Blake, Faith Diskin, Linda Donath, Arlene Eber, Jay Fagan, Ellen Frank, Chaim Bear Greenwald, Arthur Grossman, Gerald Hirsch, Mark Joseph, Jane Beard Cass, Gertrude Katz, Deirdre Klein, Helene Krotman, Emmanuel Kiprios, Leo Leibowitz, William Littman, Audrey Lubo, Sandra Tromberg Luongo, Nancy Nagel, Harry Olstein, Jeannie Rubin, Howard Schreier, David Senth, Anita Sheldon, Alan Silver, Marlise Silverberg, and Matthew Adam Zimmerman. We also mark the yard sites that occurred during last week for Sylvia Bohm, Miriam Brandolini, Tilly Danoff, Dallas Ernst, Barbara Friedman, Harry Friedman, Molly Goldstein, Ruth Gonzer, Anna Harris, Irving Heller, Libby Kamenkow, Samuel Koffler, Donald Kyle, Meyer Levine, Edith Miller, Bruce Norton, Morris Raff, Jerome Irwin Rinder, Richard Rube, William Schwartz, Sarah Simon, Jeffrey Spanier, Rachel Waldman, and Charlotte Woke. In addition to the names that we just mentioned, if there's anybody watching at home, you can say the names of your loved ones or add them to the chat. Anybody here saying Kaddish for anybody we didn't mention? Okay, and we'll join together on page 598 of the Morris Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah.
Amen.
Ve'alma divrach yirtei ve'amlich malchutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. V'agalav zman kari v'yivru. Amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach le'alam le'almei almai. Yitbarach v'yishtarach v'yitbar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudsha b'richu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shalom rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be forever.
Amen.
Okay, good Shabbos, everybody, and almost Chag Sameach. A few important announcements. First is to please join us for our Torah study, which will begin at 12 o'clock, and it will be the first Shabbat of the month, therefore the Women's Torah Commentary Torah study, this time facilitated by Rabbi Dr. Rebecca Joseph. So again, please join us at 12 o'clock. It's open to everybody, and we hope that you will be able to join us. A reminder that later this evening at 7 o'clock, I'll be participating along with my colleague, Rabbi Josh Franklin, and our wonderful friend and colleague, Rabbi David Wyman, who are all going to get a chance to teach a little bit as a part of our Tikkun Leil Shavuot. And remember, it is going to be available both in person at the Jewish Center of the Hamptons in East Hampton, if you meet the protocols for COVID and if you've signed up in advance, or you can join us on Zoom. Either way, we will be happy to see you and to be a part of this. Again, that's 7 o'clock tonight. And a reminder that tomorrow morning Shavuot services, which include the service of Yizkor, will begin at 10 o'clock. Again, 10 o'clock, different than our Shabbat morning service, 10 o'clock. Those will be Zoom only. Sunday in the church, can't quite have a service. It's just part of the reality.
Can't have services with these.
Yes, right. So we'll be on Zoom. We managed it reasonably well,
good.
right? Okay, so tomorrow again, 10 o'clock on Zoom.
I'll see you.
Or you can watch streaming live on our website, YouTube, or Facebook channel. A few other things coming up this week. On Monday, Lina Mitzvah will be meeting at 11:30. My virtual class on Heschel and the Prophets is at 12 o'clock. Social Justice Committee has its meeting online at 5 o'clock as well. On Tuesday, there is a lecture and light meal at the East End Food Institute on the campus of Stony Brook Southampton College at 4 o'clock. Later that evening, there is a board meeting at 7:30. Also, a reminder that this Thursday, we are welcoming on Zoom Scott Richmond, who is the Regional Director of the ADL, who is going to join us as part of our growing series of programs, thanks to our wonderful anti-Semitism committee that are helping us to focus on a number of different elements of anti-Semitism. And Mr. Richmond's conversation with me and opportunity for Q&A will be focused on the state of anti-Semitism and, very importantly, how communities just like ours can help to confront it. So again, that's Thursday on Zoom. And a number of things coming up later in the month, lots of stuff to check out. Just a reminder also for our annual Members and Friends annual cocktail party, in which we are celebrating our beloved Gail Gambino and one of our beloved teachers of the Hebrew School, Diane Schiffman. So we hope you'll be able to join us for that in one form or the other. And with that, I think those are all of my most immediate announcements. Anything else?
I found the alternate.
Oh, okay. So what we think... Lauren says we found the alternate.
Reformjudaism.org.uk has something funky. So,
Yeah.
But the Rabbinical Assembly.
Yeah. What do they do? Because that would have been more likely what we would have followed if that had been the case.
They said that you can either do what we did,
Yeah.
or Isaiah 63, or Joshua 8.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I'll present those options to my father and see if he remembers any of those potential options. But something about it does seem off. That is for sure.
I'll send you this.
Thank you very much, Cantor. Okay, so with that, we'll conclude our service first with Ein Kelohenu, which is on page 626, and then we'll do Kiddush. Ein Kelohenu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Michelohenu, Michadonenu, Michemalkeinu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu. Now on page 604. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam, beini u'bein b'nei Yisrael, oti le'olam, oti le'olam. לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי 6 ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. על כן בירך אדוני את יום השבת ויקדשהו סברי. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן. Okay, good Shabbos everybody. Good Shabbos Laura, good Shabbos Howard, good Shabbos Bensy. We'll see you guys on Zoom in just a little bit.